think we can start now. So a very good afternoon to everyone and welcome to our Emerging Leaders Series webinar number 6. The topic for today is transition to circular economy and how we can play a role. In today's linear economy-based business model, it's being currently scrutinized from a social, environmental, and business perspective. As a result, diverse responses such as landfill closure, ban on materials, and extended producer responsibility policies are advancing across the globe. In this context, the circular economy business model have emerged as a promising strategy, gaining increased attention and support in the society to the extent that the International Standards Organization has taken responsibility to create a series of standards to define, measure, and help organizations kickstart the circular economy process, or transition as we call it. We can all play a part, and today we are delighted to invite my good friends, Ms. Cathrine Barth from Nordic Circular Hotspot, Mr. Fong from Dávila, Singapore and Malaysia, and Ms. Mariana López from Ecole to join us. Before we proceed, for this webinar, we will be recording it for publicity purposes. Attendees will be able to ask questions at any point during the seminar using the Q&A function seen at the bottom of your screen, not the chat button. The Q&A will be addressed towards the end of the presentation. There will also be a satisfaction poll and survey at the end of the webinar. And if you're encountering any technical issue, please use the chat button to communicate with the event's organizer. First, please allow me to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have Ms. Cathrine Barth, Managing Partner of Nordic Circular Hotspot and Head of Circular Economy in Natural State. The Nordic Circular Hotspot is a 10-year circular market transition program run by 10 managing partners in 5 Nordic countries plus the Netherlands. Our first panelist, Cathrine, is a domain expert on the circular economy, circular design, and innovation strategy. She was also the co-founder of Circular Norway and initiator of the Circularity Gap Report, as she will explain later. Cathrine provides a learning mindset for this new economic system and uses proven methodologies within systems design thinking, collaborative innovation programming, and business model methodology for circular development. Next, my good friend, Mr. Fong, is the country director of Dávila, Singapore and Malaysia. Dávila's portfolio of business, as you are aware, delivers a broad range of differentiated science-based product and solution. Paul is responsible for exploring growth opportunities in Singapore and Malaysia, and he's very passionate about sustainability, inclusion, and diversity agenda in this industry. In fact, Paul has implemented the first in the world permanent shoe waste recycling ecosystem in Singapore that has recently won the SICC Sustainability Award. And this is a fine example of Mr. Paul's contribution towards a more sustainable and healthier future. At the same time, Paul sits in the board of directors of the Chemical Industry Council of Malaysia and Singapore Chemical Industry Council. He is also a member of the Singapore's Environment Resource Standards Committee, as well as the National Mirror Committee for the ISO 323 on the circular economy. Next, we are delighted to have Ms. Mariana López, Program Manager from Ecole. Ecole is an international NGO with members and experts advocating for environmentally friendly technical standards, policies, and laws with strong environmental principle. Ms. Mariana López is an experienced international program manager with 7 years of professional experience in circular economy, research, project management, monitoring, and evaluation. In her current role as Circular Economy Program Manager at Ecole, Mariana provides technical expertise on circular economy in the areas of corporate sustainability reporting, sustainable finance, voluntary sustainable standards. Prior to this, Mariana conducted research at Lund University and the European Environmental Bureau on product policy, with a particular focus on eco-design and repair policies for the waste electrical and electronic products. Last but not least, my name is Dr. Adrian Kuah, the leader of the Sustainability Research Cluster at James Cook University. I have been involved in environmental sustainability issues for over 25 years, firstly as an environmental engineer in Singapore's Ministry of the Environment, and latterly as a researcher. My work on the circular economy commenced in 2015, and I've led the investigation of circular economy practice in Asia since 2015. I'm delighted to be your host and moderator for today. So it is so wonderful, ladies and gentlemen, to have all of you on board this discussion, Paul, Marianne, and Cathrine. To start the discussion, let's begin with some fundamentals, shall we, for the audience. So experts have defined the circular economy as an economic system that uses a systemic approach to maintain a circular flow of resources by recovering, retaining, and adding to their values while contributing to sustainable development. There is a caveat, however. The use of virgin resources must be kept low, and the circular flow of resources is kept as close to minimize emissions and losses from the economic system. First of all, for the audience, what is the circular economy, and what are the different models that we can come to understand in order to support the circular economy? Cathrine, shall we first go to you?
Thank you so much for a very kind introduction, and I will try to open an understanding of a circular economy, because we live in transition times where we have to unwind a very, very regulated and subsidized linear economy in many ways. I will try to share like a colorful chart how we can actually look at the global economy, and I will share a little bit what the distinct circular business models are. But first, it is all not about how much plastic we can take back into our system. It is not about how to deal with fast-growing waste mountain. This is really about how to design products and systems and services that are waste-free, that are pollution-free, and where all materials have a plan for some kind of eternal use. Also, and I will share a little bit how this might look. Just give me a second here. This is the only graph I will show. This is a map which is measuring the global economy is only 8.6% circular. This was lastly measured in 2021. It used to be 9%, and I regret it is decreasing. I will explain a little bit how this looks, because this is a square picture of our beautiful round Earth. How we, on the left-hand side, it illustrates what kind of resources we take out of the Earth, which is metals and minerals. That's like the purple chart, and orange, and then we have fossil fuels, and then we have biomass. And biomass is everything which is alive. It might be wood, it's food, but it's like the living part of Earth resources. On the right-hand side, I think this is very interesting. You can see these color buttons, and they are representing our societal needs. How you live in Singapore or in Brussels or in Oslo, we all need cover some basic human needs. And these are some kind of put up here. It's about the blue, it's about housing. The green one is about nutrition and food. And thirdly, the biggest one is transportation and mobility. And we see here as a red color chart. And this is how we can understand the complexity, how much resources it actually takes to make a pen, and that everything we wear, do, eat is ever a material on its journey. The last I will show you, when you see this thin gray serpent or snake on the bottom, this is the illustration how little gets back into our economy. So less than 10% of all materials ever gets back into the economy. That's like a key understanding how to deal with this complexity and why we
Cathrine,
have.
Cathrine,
Yes?
can we change that to a presentation mode so that the audience can see it? Yes, thank you very much.
Sorry, I was not aware. So this is how it's. This is eternal elaboration, but I will continue and see how we can categorize circular business models, so we don't have to think so much on the complexity every day, but be very concrete how to work. So we can see in any like product or business model system, we shall consider to always prioritize renewable or regenerative resources into whatever we make or produce. We will hear more from this from Paul later on. When we look for business models, we look for sharing business models. It's like how can we, and we see that resale and sharing business models are really the new platforms of a circular economy, innovation and entrepreneurship. We also know that when we go from selling as fast and much as possible to leasing out or subscriptions, we categorize a product as a service. So I don't sell too many pens, but I can lend it, share it, or we can lease it. So PaaS models, that is also about resource productivity. Thirdly, fourth, how could we plan all products for product enhanced lifetime? So this is not about and we know that a light bulb, the longest living light bulb, it has been working for more than 100 years. It is perfectly possible for us to produce products that last, have good longevity, and have good quality and a high level of repairability. And finally, when we see the end of life of a material, getting to the graveyard or crematorium, instead of burning it or putting it on landfill, how could we actually upcycle, reuse, recycle, and avoid any opportunity to become waste? So I think this was some kind of how I wanted to just start understanding that circularity starts in the beginning of a product lifetime, not in the end.
Absolutely. Very nicely put it, Cathrine. You know, using product as a service, sharing economy, product life extension, optimizing resources are certainly the key step towards the transition to circular economy. Mariana, what do you think are some of the business strategy that claims to support the circular economy, but actually runs at the peripheral?
That's a great question, Adrian. And just to start, great to be here with everyone, Cathrine and Paul, and thank you as well, Adrian, for a great introduction this morning from Brussels, this afternoon for you in Singapore. Let me start answering that question just to go by going a quick step back. So let us all remember that circular economy is a tool, is a means to an end. And what is the end? We want the efficient and effective use of resources to meet our societal needs without going over the carry capacity of the earth. And this is very beautifully put in Cathrine's graph, right? We have resources, societal needs. We want to stay within it. So when you're thinking about business models, you know, we're flooded with information and claims about circularity are all over. So we were to think, you know, how can I assess and see when is a business truly really on the right track or trying to do circular? You can think about it this way. Is that business really trying to do circularity? Meaning, is it helping us use resources more efficiently and effectively? So let me put it this way, and I'll show you a quick graph. So I have this bottle, right? The screen is not showing it, but just let's see these glasses so you can see them. And I want to keep, the circular economy tells me, I want to keep these glasses as glasses for as long as I can. I want to keep them in the economy. So I want to use them as glasses, and then I want to repair them. So as Cathrine said, first I want to design them to last. So I'm going to make them very sturdy, and then I'm going to do them so they have screws, so I can repair them if they get loose. And then I want to be able to change the lenses, and reuse them for 10 years, right? So you first want to see a company that is doing that is really, really trying to provide the same level of services with very little resources, right? With less resources. So that's a great sign. And then maybe when these glasses don't work anymore, I want to be able to separate them very well, to reuse the screws, and maybe to reuse, this little stem and use it for whatever other creative process. So you want to keep them in the economy. Fantastic. At the very end, when I cannot do anything else with it, then I will recycle it. Now, a business that only focuses on recycling often, gets a bit shamed by the NGO community as non-circular. But I would like to throw a caveat there. So business strategies that are focusing on recycling, but without doing everything else before, those are businesses that perhaps could be thought they're abusing the concept of the circular economy just to get good business, right? Because recycling is not bad, but it's the last of the strategy. So if you only focus on recycling, what you're doing is that instead of using keeping the value of a resource, you're quickly destroying it. And as we know today, although technology is advancing very quickly, most of our resources, when we recycle them, they don't turn into, you have a blender, it doesn't turn into a new blender, right? Maybe it turns into road filler, or it turns into something that is not of the same quality. So that's why, and let me share this quick slide to end my long answer. When we talk about business strategies, we want to focus on what we call upstream strategies. So what upstream strategies, and let me check that you can see the right slide. Can you see the full slide? Now, are you seeing the other side? Let me change again. Okay. Adrian, if you can give me a heads up when I share the right one. Let me do it like this.
Okay, I think this is fine.
Is that okay? Good. So if you see, you have a suite of strategies. Why? Because circular economy is a tool. So it's giving you a toolbox in order to do this sustainable resource management. So at the very top, you want to refuse, rethink, reuse. This is when you're designing things better. In the middle, now that you design things well, you want to keep them in the system. You extend their life. You reuse, you repair, you refurbish, you remanufacture, you repurpose. This is like the meat of the circular economy, right? This is where all the opportunities are and where a lot of the change is happening. And then towards the end, then you recycle and you recover. Now, this is not bad, but it's not where you want to live. You always want to move up the hierarchy. So those are the strategies. When you're thinking about circular businesses, think about, is this only a linear model recycling, or is this a company that's truly trying to improve and provide the same amount of service with least resources? So that's what I think.
Thank you, Mariana, for your passion, and your illustration. I think it is very vivid. For introducing the resource hierarchy, I think it's a fundamental understanding on, what are the first approaches towards a more circular economy system, rather than just going to step 5 or step 7 straight away. So thank you very much. So finally to Paul, with your vast experience in this industry and leadership in the various standards agency, perhaps can you explain to our audience, why do you think that business and society needs to first understand and then gradually implement the circular economy? Paul, over to you.
Adrian, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. And really thank you for having me. And thank you, Adrian, for my introduction. Very kind of you. I would say this way, Adrian, everyone, whether you are in government or you're in businesses or you're in society, we all need to understand there is simply no plan B. We only have one planet. So we cannot allow climate change impact to go unabated. Circular economy is a tool, like what Mariana has said earlier, which everyone needs to embrace. It can be a journey. To some, they could be in a position to be more advanced, to advocate and to lead. To others, they could be simply taking the initial steps. And it's okay. There's no shame in that. But we can no longer simply operate under a linear economy model, the conventional make and dispose. We need to embrace the mantra of reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover before we dispose and landfill. But I'm a perennial optimistic. With collaboration, and I'll emphasize the word collaboration, I do believe that circular economy, while very challenging, can be part of our future. It actually will not be a question of if we will move towards circular economy. It is a question of when and whether you will be part of it. And if you are not part of it, it may be an existential threat to all of us, whether you're in business or in society. So the businesses and society first need to understand this important message. Back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for warning us on the existential crisis that we may all face because of our lack of action towards climate change and sustainability. Cathrine, our second set of questions revolves around important measures and action supporting the circular economy. And with you being a key player in the Nordic countries, what are some of the circular actions that you have seen results that that were from the implementation that you guys have put in? What are the kind of actions, circular actions, such as circular design, circular resource management, that are key to the Nordic country? Cathrine, would you like to share with us?
Yes, I will refer to what Paul Fong also states. The first and most important was to try to make the Nordic countries collaborate. Very often people come to me and listen, how do the Nordics collaborate in circular economy? And then I can reveal we hate to collaborate. We don't like to collaborate, and that is very normal. So just putting up an organization where the purpose is to share and care and admire and learn from each other has been a 3-year project so far. And it's a little bit with tongue in cheek, but this is actually the learning from a linear world. And also the Nordic is the 12th largest economy in the world. So understanding that we are better off working together when we are to transition than do it in 5 different separate ways. Finland are fantastic, Denmark are fantastic, Swedish are fantastic, but we have very distinct, different economies. Myself coming from a very oil-dependent economy, and also fish. So we are only raw material exporters of fish, which is the future, and oil, which is the past. So when we leave like the cultural part of collaboration, we are also dealing with a very severe challenge. We are the highest consumption per capita in the world, and that is hedonistic and it's unacceptable. And how can we understand that it's not someone else's problem, but we have to deal with this? Thirdly, we have to also understand this is not only about climate, but this is about geopolitical security. So because we have an import dependency, so we cannot fix our Nordic circular economy within the Nordics. We have to collaborate with global value chains, especially in Southeast Asia, in the United States. So we need to collaborate globally. We have been very much, but the good thing about the Nordic is we have strong regulations. Half of the Nordic countries are part of the EU, and we have to accept that EU is really driving this train now, and it's really happening fast. So our challenge is to make the businesses and stakeholders and the SMEs of tomorrow, the innovations that has not yet been born, to make them ready for the regulation, which is happening really fast now.
Thank you, Cathrine. So you mentioned some of the key influences from the European Union. Mariana, what are the few things that the European Union is doing well in the circular economy space that actually supports this transition towards the circular economy? And would you be able to share with our audience how these would help businesses and society better understand and attain circularity?
Absolutely. And just as a bit of background for the audience that may not be as familiar with policy in the European Union, just to begin by saying that circular economy became a core pillar of European Union or EU's policy in 2015 when they launched their Circular Economy Action Plan. And that's when it started. But then really it was in 2020, they launched a revised action plan, which is the first thing that I believe was done well, because the Circular Economy Action Plan now is understood as a tool, as one of the key tools for the European Union to meet their European Green Deal, right? So it's seen as a set of tools. Now, what Europe is doing that I find very hopeful and positive is that groundwork, the framework that they're setting to work within the circular economy is very comprehensive, right? So within the Circular Action Plan, there's a lot of regulations stemming from it, because the Circular Economy Action Plan is more like a framework and a plan. So on one side, which is fantastic, the European Commission, the European Union has decided that they will look at the circular economy throughout its entire life cycle. What does that mean? They're thinking about resource extraction, resource production, resource use, also disposal, and secondary markets, and markets for secondary materials, which is very important. So they're thinking about the entire life cycle. This is really, really, really important, and I think it's a good sign that that's how it's being thought out. It's yet to be how it actually gets implemented, but let me just think about tell you how it's laid out. Then you have on one side a lot of legislation coming for specific product groups, especially those that have been identified as being hotspots for resource use. So, for example, you have legislation on textiles, electronics, construction products. So they're really focusing on those key plastic, packaging, etc. On the other side, you also have the European Union making circular economy important in their sustainable taxonomy. What is a taxonomy? It's like a dictionary. So if you're an investor and you want to invest in something sustainable, you open the dictionary and it tells you which economic activities are sustainable. And now there are economic activities that contribute to circular economies. It's starting to signal investors, we want you to invest there. We're going to channel investors investing money towards circular economy, towards improving resource management. Then you also have the European Union mandating companies to report, companies I think bigger than 250 people, to report on circular economy, what they're doing. Why is this important and how does this help companies? Because it's telling companies, hey, this is happening. The European Union cares about sustainable resource management and you need to start to think about it. So you're gonna start to try to assess it and see how it is material to your company. And then you also want to look into what do you need to do in order to improve that and disclose that information so that others can use it. And then at the final end, you have the Circular Economy Action Plan, really also looking about improving waste management and starting to mobilize the secondary markets, secondary materials markets. So overall, I think how they're laying the groundwork to really improve resource management, it's been done in a comprehensive way, and it will help companies in different ways. First of all, it's telling them this is important. And like Paul said earlier, it's about when you engage with it. It's like climate change, that's it. And it's starting to create a lot of guidance on how to do it, right? Through different regulations and through providing a lot of initiatives that are getting people talking about it. So I think it's gonna be a good example for other areas of the world, both on what they're doing well, but also to watch them and learn from what they could be doing better.
Thank you, Mariana, for sharing the European Union story. So I guess it's a place to watch and learn. Now, watching and learn from a Singapore perspective, Paul, you are currently a key member of the very important Environment and Resource Standards Committee that oversees several standards on the environment. Yeah, and of course, you're a key member of the Singapore National Mirror Committee for the Circular Economy. Now, with respect to this, can you share with us whether Singapore, you think, are in a position to transit itself or transform itself towards the circular economy? Paul.
Okay. If you are in Singapore, some of you may already know this. More than 90% of Singapore construction materials in roads, in infrastructures like our flats and so on, are recycled. Singapore is already implementing EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, reporting on packaging, and plan is undergoing for e-waste. It had recently published a technical reference guideline on sustainable packaging. These are all steps towards circular economy. Authorities are moving towards the right direction. Make no mistake, standards will be written. In addition to that, you have incentive, such as a carbon exchange trading system. You do have disincentive, such as carbon tax, to facilitate the economy to move towards a circular economy, right? So I think we'll probably need a combination of all these tools to help us to transition. And we certainly need the collaboration of all stakeholders, from the government to community, from suppliers to customer. Later on, I hope to be able to share with you a model which essentially demonstrate that concept. But I do believe we are in a position to transit or transform towards circular economy. In fact, if you follow the newspaper article today, they are talking about the challenges to move towards hydrogen economy, which is a step towards circular economy, right? In a sense. So I think there are more to be done. Don't get us wrong. It is not so straightforward, that easy, but I believe with collaboration, we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Again, it is watch this space because we can do more and we will do more. Cathrine, you are very passionate about collaboration, right? And you are also very passionate about Singapore. So what are your views about what Paul and Mariana have said so far?
I think it's very inspiring to listen to both Mariana and Paul. We have different lenses into the same kind of Rubik's Cube. And when I listen, this confirms what we learn. So being able to understand a system complexity and the need for massive collaboration without being exhausted or confused is one challenge. And then also regional wise, that's why I think Singapore is a very interesting market and business case, as with Australia, because these are actually physically natural borders on our Earth. They are island nations or island continents. And when we look at material flow, how it's invisibly and chaotically is flowing around on our Earth, this is how you can actually break down into measurable pieces. It's very interesting to see the same population of Singapore on its this very distinct region, and then you have this as Norway, which is one of the third largest coastlines in the world, and it's really distributed. So a circular economy is about distributing and not centralizing. It is about closing the loop, how to get collaboration and I would say symbiosis function. And I would say the Singaporean economy is very interesting to follow. It could actually be like piloting the tomorrow system design on city nation level, because you can measure about everything that comes in, everything that goes out, and then you can start optimizing the productivity of all materials when you have a banking system in a way. What kind of materials is the Singaporean inventory? So I think it's really lovely to listen and learn, and also about what works in Singapore, I can assure you probably works in Oslo. So that's we don't have time to reinvent the wheels. And this is also why when we initiated the Nordic Circular Hotspot, which is not our idea, we learned from the Dutch, which has a massive tradition of internal collaboration. Because I'll finalize soon, because what is preventing us, and maybe we don't know it because we live in a 2 or 3 year, 100-year-old linear economy, where we live in silos, sectors, and we think it's very comfortable. And we think it's very uncomfortable to deal with other professions or other nations, but this is what we have to do, because the value in circular economy, it happens between industries and silos. And this requires not only regulations, because you cannot force anyone to collaborate. This is where we have to push the innovation engine. Innovation is about growing a new economy with new solutions, with new materials that nobody have known yet. So this is why it is really interesting to see how we can maneuver this transition together.
Thank you, Cathrine. So it seems it is all about flow, material flow, trade flow. And now we'll talk about the flow of greenhouse gases and the flow of carbon, right? So as we are all aware, back in 2018, the ISO released the ISO 14067 on greenhouse gases. How can we reduce the carbon footprint of products? What are the guidelines? Now, the circular economy has a focus on life cycle analysis as a measure for circularity. And the focus on decarbonization is again very, very important. So why, Cathrine, why do you think the understanding of carbon embodied material and carbon emissions as a result of our human activities are so important? Cathrine.
Well, carbon is actually the material of life, not to forget that. So cannot be just, that's the poetic part of this and realistic, but solving the carbon problem, when we are able to solve this, we have come very far. This requires carbon capture technologies, and this requires also business models. So what do we do with the captured carbon? How do we price it? How are we going to, and now we see some kind of a market battle. Are we going to do carbon capture and storage or carbon capture and usage? On behalf of some kind of the regenerative and circular movement, I'm really keen fan that we start seeing what is the next life and how can we actually put carbon in motion. Also to defend the huge investments that needs to be done in carbon capture technologies. What we see now, I'm worried about the time frame and the cost. Secondly, because it's very expensive, and how do we scale the solutions that can reduce the damaging effects from coal plants, from cement factories, from like the wastefulness of the linear economy. Secondly, I also want to emphasize what worries me is the level of investments which is not now put into designing for a circular society. We use huge investment amounts, brain capacity and circular intelligence to solve the waste problems in the linear economy, such as carbon capture, which is an end-of-life motion. And I will really defend this, but I really want to see the equivalent for investments and knowledge building and initiatives in the upstream. And I'm very sure that Mariana want to comment on this, because this is like, we have to separate when you live in a recycling economy. That's like when you invest all of the problem solving in the waste part, and in the circular, more mature circular economy, we also invest in the beginning and the birth of new solutions. But the carbon is really we have to fix this, and we don't see market-ready solutions yet, and that worries me.
Thank you, Cathrine. Yeah, certainly it's a very new, interesting business model that is evolving in the respect of carbon capture and carbon storage, and giving us a reason to maybe consume more for the wrong reason. Mariana, you're very passionate about decarbonization, on the other hand. So maybe you can explain to the audience, what is decarbonization and why do we urgently need this?
Absolutely. First, I just want to echo Cathrine that it's very important not to get caught on this technology fix alone, and even less if it's just a technology fix on end of life. So let's produce as usual. We just capture all the carbon and store it in the bottom of the earth. And we know already that we're going to have to capture carbon just because we put out so much. So I understand that technology needs to be developed, but we shouldn't just solely rely on the technology shift. I think we also need to think, okay, we need to change our lifestyles and our business models, and that's painful and it's difficult. worked with this industry, this manufacturing plant, and they were doing a fantastic job, but they had a very linear model, and all they were doing was, just separating their waste. And the conversation with them was like, don't tell me that I'm really trying to do a good job. I invested my entire life in building this very efficient business, and I'm really trying to do my best. I understand the pain, and you cannot just tell them you're bad. It's like, no, it's fantastic. Start with the separation of waste and build forward, but let's just not settle there. So I agree with Cathrine that we need to be ambitious, because we need it. So now transitioning to decarbonization. What is decarbonization? In a nutshell, decarbonization or a low carbon economy means that we transition out of fossil fuels, and so we provide our energy and every need on renewable or non-fossil basis, right? So mostly renewable energies. That's how it's going. And low carbon societies or decarbonized societies has become this buzzword, and it's everyone in the world is working towards it. We're going to decarbonize, stop using fossil fuels, use renewables, and meet society's needs that way. Why is it important? Well, I'm not going to say anything anyone in this audience does not know. We are heading towards a world that will be warming rapidly, sadly, more than 1.5 degrees by the end of the mid-century, it sounds like, compared to pre-industrial levels. What does this mean? We all know that, we're changing our habitat. It's going to become more and more inhospitable for us to live, period. If we want to keep our habitat in a hospitable way as we've known it, during this geological era and not get out of that, we got to keep global warming to no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, period. Decarbonization is absolutely key for that. We just need it. And it's a life or death situation, period. And I know I'm saying it with a smile. Maybe I should be very angry and serious to make a bigger impact, but this is how critical it is. And it's sometimes frustrating to see that we get it, but we don't move fast enough. Now, let me just make a quick link to conclude by saying decarbonization and what the circular economy has to do with it. Well, circular economy is a tool to achieve decarbonization. And this is seen already within the European Union. That's how it's perceived. But why is it a tool? I've seen often circular economy being equated to an environmental issue. And circular economy is just a tool that can help many environmental issues. Global warming being one of them, biodiversity loss being another one, resource depletion being a third one, right? So it is a tool. So circular economy can help decarbonization. Why? Because, and I don't remember the exact number, but it's along these lines. I know that production of materials, and the bigger ones, aluminum, steel, cement, etc., I believe they accounts to 1/4 of total greenhouse gas emissions, because production of these materials is incredibly energy intensive. So as just going back to the beginning of our talk, circular economy is trying to provide the same level of service with less resources, and specifically with less virgin resources. That just means less energy use. You need to extract less, you need to produce less. So you can say that in many cases, there will be a positive correlation between less resource use and less greenhouse gas emissions. And that's why both decarbonization and circular economy go together and are really important to keep our planet habitable for the next generations.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana, for this illustration. I think it's all coming together pretty clearly now. We need to do both and collaborate together. On one hand, we need to try to decarbonize, and the other hand, for the remaining part, perhaps we can actually do some carbon capture and some carbon storage. But most importantly, I really like the slide that you presented on the resource hierarchy. What should we be attempting to do first before coming to the end, right? To maximize resource utility as far as possible, to stretch it out as much as possible. So on the topic of carbon, I'm coming to you, Paul. From a business perspective, because you are a leading business practitioner, what are your views on low carbon solutions for business? And what are your views on carbon taxation, Paul?
First, let me take this opportunity to clearly state something here. Everything else being equal, we always need to choose the solution which has the lowest carbon. And allow me to share the simple example to illustrate the concept, because every one of you here can play a role. For example, take the use of a drinking straw, a single-use drinking straw. The best solution is, of course, to refuse using it. To Mariana hierarchy of usage, right? Don't use it. But if you have to use it, choose the one that has the lowest carbon solution. Now, for example, I heard people say, let's drop the plastic straw because it ends up in our ocean and waterways. And then they replace it with paper straw. And we know sometimes paper will get mutilated after you mix with water, and then you throw it away after one use. And if you use one single time only, which one do you think has a higher carbon, paper or plastic? Actually, paper. In fact, research has shown that it's 3 to 4 times more carbon in paper than in plastic, for example. So what does it show to me? It showed to me that education and awareness creation is key, especially amongst the education institution. In fact, that's one reason why when Adrian asked me to partake in this particular webinar, I jumped into the invite, because I believe that if you start young from school to learn about the right sciences and not blindly follow the ill-informed sentiments, we have a chance, right? And on your specific question of how to encourage business to adopt a low carbon solution, I believe we have to use a combination of tools. We have to use policies and standards. We have to use incentive and disincentive. What does all this thing do? All this thing is to really create or equalize a level playing field among the solutions. Because businesses are going to be very, they always wanted to go to a cheaper solution. But you have all these tools, you can equalize and create a level playing field. We have a chance for circular economy to be as effective and sustainable, and pun intended, a sustainable model going forward. Adrian?
Thank you, Paul, for sharing this. I was just so engrossed in looking at the many questions that came onto this chat. And we'll have some time for questions at a later stage. Moving on, we come to our next set of questions that is a myth or a solution for the circular economy. And here we have talking about ecosystem approach, or an industry symbiosis approach, or even a very simple value chain approach towards circularity. So for the benefit of our audience, let's try to clarify some of these myths or approaches in terms of using an ecosystem or industry symbiosis to collaborate in terms of resource optimization and waste minimization. Now, with the COVID-19, it has become very imperative, the importance of global supply chain. Why is the value chain system participation particularly important to the circular economy narrative? Mariana, perhaps we can start with you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in the circular economy, we care about many things, right? But some of those, we really want to minimize the use of virgin resources, so extract less, right? We want to increase the use of resources that are secondary, so something that has already been used. And we want to know what our products are made of, because we want to have less toxins in them. Why? Because a product that has less toxins or less substance of concern will be easier to recirculate, to reuse, to recycle, right? Something that has toxins, then it's harder to reuse. So these are things the circular economy cares about. Now, when you think about how products are made today, you have very few companies that are involved from extraction through disposal. This is a job that is segmented, so you extract, you add a little bit of value, you pass it. Someone takes it, adds a little value, passes it down, etc., etc., etc. So by the time I get, whatever material it is, and I add value, I need to understand what's in it and what is it. for two reasons. One, so that I could, I know how to use it, but well, this is one thing. So you want to know what's in it, so you know what people can know. And the other reason that you want to collaborate is precisely for what Cathrine has been saying, right? That a lot of the opportunities in the circular economy lies in the betweens. And because the one other thing that the circular economy really cares about is that we want to get rid of waste. And this is, sounds very catchy and really cool, but what does this really mean? Well, it also means that if I'm company A, whatever is waste for me could be a resource for someone else. You need to find that connection. I need to know who is producing something that I could potentially use as a resource. And if we don't have this way to communicate, and if we don't have this way to share information, it becomes really difficult. So that's why it's very important. And you do have some initiatives, and I'm sure both perhaps Paul and Cathrine can speak to this in more detail, but at the European Union level, in this first set of why it's important, which is you just want to know what the product is made of, so you understand, how can you use it to keep it in the economy for as long as possible. The European Union is developing something called the Digital Product Passport, which is this concept where everyone in the value chain is going to input information about the source of the materials, where things are made of, are they toxic, etc. And so that at any point in the value chain, all the way down to the consumer and even after, you can scan it and you can know what's in it and better manage it. Now, we also now need to create these bigger loops so that when we're producing things, and it's something that I think Cathrine knows a lot about, so I'll leave her to her, you can find this symbiosis, right? When my waste becomes someone else's resource.
Thank you, Mariana. I simply love your illustration. It's so passionate, and you made the point very well. We need to understand the value chain component in order to decide whether the product is environmentally friendly or not, it's done in the proper way or not, whether resources are extracted from the correct source or not. Cathrine, I know you're very passionate about industrial symbiosis and urban symbiosis. Perhaps you can share with the audience what is this concept, and how would this concept be good for a country like Singapore in supporting the circular economy? Cathrine, over to you.
I mentioned a little bit recently why I think Singapore is really interesting, both from governance level. It's like a nation state and a very one of the highest dense populations and businesses. And it means that the density, and when we talk about looping value chains, I would see the opportunities to identify what Mariana said, somebody's waste can be other people's resource. And then going into a mindset where we have to think like nature. What does nature actually do? Nature does not produce waste. Nature, and this is where the word metabolism, which is like how our bodies work, or symbiosis, which is maybe a little bit, it feels strange to use, but I think that in a couple of years, this will be very, very common language within business development to identify symbiosis opportunities. And I can share, and if you succeed that your waste has become someone else's resource, that's actually where you create a new economy. And this is all, when you say, how do we understand the wasteful value chains of today? We don't have to reinvent the world, but a good transition strategy always starts with where are we now? And then we can start looking in all parts of the value chain. So how can we save resources and wasteful activities? This is how we can identify, for example, the high level of coffee consumption, where 99% of the coffee value is lost before you drink your cup in 10-20 minutes and after the ground is over. So if you could use all the coffee ground material, and you could make furniture, you could make building materials, you can make clothing, you can make coffee-based leather, and this is where the new times begin, where we do material innovation and product innovation. Singapore is renowned to rethink its own purpose. It has done several times. And that's also why I see this as a very good marketplace to explore symbiosis and new economy opportunities. Finally, I will share a case, because when we discover what Singapore could do, it can become a flagship for more nations, how to solve think new on resource management. I recently visited Iceland. Iceland is a very, the economy is very dependent on fish and fish exports, so is Norway. And I can share the differences between our two national economies, and it would be wonderful to compare with Singapore as well. In Norway, in our ocean farming, we farm the fish and we export it to export markets as soon as possible. There is no productivity in Norway. So we say the resource productivity on white fish is 56%. And then comes Iceland Ocean Cluster, which really puts a symbiosis in motion. And what they have a huge American market, but instead of just sending the fish to the United States, they start seeing what can we make out of the fish. And they can measure a resource productivity on 97% of the same resource. And why is that? Because they use brand innovation, they use product innovation. And I actually brought this from last time I came home. They actually, instead of taking out the nice fish fillet and the rest is biogas or waste, how can we take all the parts of the fish and see to make new products and markets? So here goes a new kind of medical innovation. They can use fish skin for burning diseases, which has very high healing effect. Of course, in the medical market, that's another market than the fish market. This has high value. How can they actually start to professionalize the use of the fish skin to replace the wasteful textile industry? Well, that's a new market. And here comes the beverage market. So here is a really hit. It's like for the, I would say would be marketplace, a collagen eager women, where our skin is getting savvy. And here is like a very cool beverage drink. It's expensive, of course, but I can promise you that it tastes good and it's like collagen beverages. So this is a new way of, and it's funny, it's inspiring, and it's a collective ecosystem movement that beats a little bit the value chain competition that we used to see.
Thank you, Cathrine, and thank you for sharing your insights about the aquaculture industry in Iceland and Norway. As a matter of fact, I know that you were just in Iceland last week because I've seen some beautiful photographs that you have taken over there. Now, in Singapore, we have been focusing on the concept of ecosystem for more than 2 decades, Paul. Is that right? So Paul, I think this also relates to one question brought up by one of our participants, Mr. Ryan Daniel. He asked, has any government promoted circular economy as a social marketing effort to ensure the buy-in of the private sector and the population? Would placing any barriers for non-cooperation be effective in compelling more participation? So this relates to what you want to raise up in terms of creating an ecosystem for circular economy. So Paul, perhaps you can answer the question at the same time.
I will be happy to. First of all, let me answer the challenge from Cathrine of Singapore become a pilot test case, pilot beta testing, and actually it works. And this is an example of waste recycling ecosystem that we created here in Singapore. So if I first ask the question to the audience, we have 5.5 million people. How many pairs of shoes do you think that is sold in Singapore per annum? Since we are in the webinar, I'll give you the answer. If it's a face-to-face lecture, I normally will get answers from students, right? The answer is about 22 million, and this is 2019 number before the COVID. Each one of us, on average, own about 4 to 5 pairs of shoes. Where do they end up? If chances are they will end up in the garbage bin, and you know in Singapore, everything that is in garbage bin will end up in the incinerator and eventually landfill. So we decided to look at this and see, can we do something about the shoe waste? In fact, the idea came about in a very fortuitous way. We were having lunch, the CEO of Sports Singapore and I are having lunch in Sports Hub, and we were showing, we saw athletes throw away their worn out shoes, and we said, can we do something about it? So we brought back the shoe to the lab. We analyzed the composition of the shoe. What can we do with the shoe? And we realized that the shoe products are actually a great material source for sports infrastructure built, like playground, like running track, like fitness corner. It can be a great infill material for yoga mat, for gym mat, for protection padding. But in order to make this particular project a success, you need to create an ecosystem from collecting them, going around to collect them from a country like Singapore, probably easier in Singapore. And I'll demonstrate another case whereby we actually manage to do it in a much larger country. Recycling it, grinding the shoe into granules, into ready material for builds. Having a technology provider like us to help to bind the materials for the builder to build the sports facility. But in the center of all this is you and I. We can contribute towards this economy. So the best way to do that, Ryan, to answer the question, is that not by compelling them to do so, but by getting the people to see the value on why we should be doing those recycling. For you and I, it's a very simple logic. It's an essential threat to our planet. For the business, it could be a branding because they are partaking in the particular collection point. They could be able to convert material that otherwise would have been incinerated and landfill into something useful. How nice would it be that you and I, eventually next time when you run in a running track or play in the playground, that this is actually made of a shoe that you and I have donated. And you think that Singapore is easy to get it done because we are a small nation, although we are quite costly in terms of our input costs. But we have just shown it that we have done it in Malaysia too. Same model, different player. The key is that to get all the value chain guy to line up and embrace the concept of recycling. But you still need to create an ecosystem, because without the ecosystem, to Mariana said, right? You will pass from one gate to another gate and pass to another gate. And once you pass through another gate, it's not my problem anymore. But when you look at the ecosystem, everybody will feel we own the project together. And that's the beauty of creating an ecosystem, which is a necessity for us to make sure that circular economy works. And this is an example of circular economy, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. So ecosystem, value chain, tomatoes, we are talking about the same thing, aren't we?
Yep.
Cathrine, there is a question for you. And this question came from Jaden Kim, and it's regarding what you have presented. His question is, what policy efforts are the government of the Nordic countries making to help companies implement various circular economy business models? Are there efforts by the government?
I will regret that Iceland and Norway, which is not part of EU, I will not refer to what they are not doing, but this is the reason why we really cling to collaborate with EU countries as Sweden, Denmark, and Finland. And these countries, Finland was the first nation in the world to make a 9-year rollout plan for becoming like fully circular on the strategy, Finland strategy, and it was made in 2016, and it's a model paper on only 40 pages and how to becoming circular within 2025. This is a world-class document that I would recommend everyone to see, and it was very much about initiating more than 100 projects that would be learning projects that could be stepping stones for policy innovation, and just accepting that we need new policies, new financial models. I would say Finland is really the front runner among the Nordic countries. What we saw in Denmark, it was when they got their national strategy for circular economy. It was run by Flemming Besenbacher, head of the Carlsberg Foundation, and it was very much led by the businesses. So what we do see, the market and business is really pushing our governments to prepare for the future, and somehow we see that maybe the governments, they are lagging and they don't understand the need to just to transform and transition. And this is what we hear from Sweden as well. They put it on the agenda, but in the name of circular economy, it's very often losing the agenda So there is not yet as common Nordic approach, but I would lastly refer to Nordic Council of Ministers, which has an innovation instrument, which is funding the Nordic Circular Hotspot and funding collaboration. And they have circular economy innovation programs and they do calls. So this is very much, I would say, a time being bottom up and not one centralized policy approach from the Nordic authorities.
Yeah, thank you for the insight that you're sharing, because certainly in the Scandinavian country, the bottoms-up approach is probably what's working best for the country rather than a top-down approach, which is often found in Asian countries. Now, there is a very related question from...
Adrian,
yes.
If I may intercede really quickly to build on Catherine's questions, since I did live in Sweden for a few years, so that I'm a bit familiar with specific Swedish policies, and I was working on repair. And the Swedish government has tried to incentivize repair, and in Sweden at least, and I believe it's the case for other Nordic countries, repair is a dying industry. People don't like to repair anymore, and it's very expensive to repair, and they're trying to revive it. And one of the ways which they did it was waiving VAT tax, value added tax, to make it cheaper. And they've been playing with by how much they need to, they didn't waive it, I think it was a percentage that they reduced to incentivize people to repair. So that's one very targeted, very specific policy that the Swedish government did. And then also in repair, which I thought was a great policy to incentivize. This was not in Sweden, this was in Austria, but Austria gave vouchers to citizens that people could spend on repair shops. So this is very directly targeted to revive that industry. So I do think, and those are just examples that comes to my mind, but I do think that there's a lot of innovation. I know Lund city in Sweden has invested a lot in libraries of things, they're called. Which is basically a place where you can drop things at work but you don't want anymore, and then people can rent them for an hour or for 2 days, sleeping bags and tents. So those are small, maybe yet I don't think they're self-sustaining business models, but at least they are initiatives that are trying to
very good point about these industries, and actually there is a line of difference between intervention by the government and promotion by the government, and that's how Singapore would like to do it. They say that we don't intervene, but we promote certain things. And definitely this is very much related to one question from a colleague of mine, Professor Peter Hoffman, to the panel. His question is, can you share your views whether you think the transition will mainly come from companies, or that we will have to rely more on emerging companies that have much more ability to design their product and services in a particular circular way? His concern is that he thinks that older companies, established companies, are way too slow with the transition. And perhaps Paul may agree or disagree on that, because Paul belongs to an old company, right?
Our company is 125 years old.
Yeah, so older established companies may not be quick enough or nimble enough to transit, and put too much economic and political weight to constrain the new emerging companies and initiative. So he'd like to hear the panel's thoughts on this matter. Who would like to go first?
I love to jump on this one.
Go ahead.
I can.
Okay, Cathrine, over to you.
I'm very sure that we have very strong opinions, but I actually, this was the first question I asked myself when I started working with this 8 years ago. And then I learned from this French, very senior guy. He said, well, Cathrine, there are 3 ways for a company becoming circular. Either you have to transition a linear one. That's almost impossible, but good luck on that journey. Second, you make a new companies and they design their business models fully circular from day one. So they don't have to clean up old cultures or cannibalizing barriers. And thirdly, they will import. So if you don't make the Norwegian or Nordic industries, someone else, the global companies, will come and present ready-made solutions. They might be Singapore-owned, for what I would know, but these are the companies. But the role of the publics, and I think they're lagging now, but we are promoting very much public procurement on circularity. So how could procurement principles, regardless of private or publics, that would actually create a market? Today there isn't a market, but the role of if the public procurement start to actually demand circularity at like several steps on the level of a product or scale, we will see this accelerate very fast. I am very stressed that our governments don't work fast enough. As Mariana mentions, the really urgent cause here is the rapid change of our resourceful nature, and our bureaucracy is not fit to that. This regardless, I will refer to Frans Timmermans, head of EU Commissions, who really reminds us the economy of tomorrow is based on decoupling resource extraction from economic growth. I have not heard that in the Nordic region yet, but I think that's the essential governmental leader, how they should speak.
Adrian, if I can answer Peter's question, presumably that question is meant for me, but from the business side. Peter, I flash back this particular slide for you to kind of, for me to point to the people, to stakeholder in this particular slide. Dow, as you know, is a 125-year-old company. We're part of perhaps a larger company. Alba Wahua, the recycler in Singapore, is actually a joint venture between Alba, a German company, and Wahua, a local Singapore SME. BT Sports is a sports applicator who are grinding the shoe. They are one of the more advanced SME, small and medium enterprise people who embrace technology that I've ever come from. Sports Singapore, as you know, is part of the government agency, Singapore government agency. Decathlon as one of the center that collect the shoe, in addition to sports center, schools, university, community spaces, and so on and so forth. You know, so you can see everybody plays a role, not necessarily big or small company. Everybody does. And I'll tell you one more thing that you will be very amazed. BT Sports has developed the world's first in situ permeable tennis court in the world. What it means is that when the rain falls, after the rain stops, within 1 or 2 minutes, the court is playable because the water basically seeps through and to the drain. It takes a while for them to develop this particular technology using water-based binder technology. That particular court, if you have not played, they are in Jurong West Sports Center, is ITF rated grade 3, level 3. In other words, it's a medium speed. It achieved Singapore Green Building Council the most sustainable certificate with 4 ticks. In other words, it's actually a leader in the industry. It started off as a sustainability project because we were trying to say, how can we do something about the sports surfaces and reduce the usage of the roller, the water roller on courts, right? Whether it's a basketball court, tennis court, and so on and so forth. We want to reduce the usage of that. The best way is that don't use it at all. So there comes the concept of developing a court that is permeable, where water can quickly disappear, right? And in Singapore, it rains 200 days in a year, and every time it rains, is about 3 to 4 hours of downtime, because not just we can't play, but we also need to dry the court, and it's productivity loss. If you have a court that you earn revenue from charging the fee to the player, there's a productivity loss. So we're marrying a case whereby a productivity problem and a sustainability problem and convert to something very useful. And guess what? The guy who came out with the invention, of course, in collaboration with some of us like Dow and so on and so forth, it's a small and medium enterprise company in BT Sports. So I think all of us here have a role and responsibility to play that is not just the big company and small company, government too. And the court is actually built for Sports Singapore. You see a collaboration, a true collaboration of a public, private and people partnership in display here. I hope I answered the question, Peter.
Thank you, Paul. Just for the background, Paul actually runs an innovation center for DAO, where actually projects like this gets funded and supported. Am I right, Paul?
Well, I would say that the shoe project started out as a STEM entrepreneurship research that I was doing it with NUS and Nanyang Poly. After my lunch conversation with the CEO of Sport Singapore, we have a problem to solve. Now, the Sport Singapore had many problems to solve. One of the problems is actually the use of the water roller and the court not being able to use because of rain, right? So that project, I decided to partner the industry because we need a quick solution, right? But the shoe project started off as a STEM entrepreneurship project, but eventually it becomes so successful right now. FYI, we have collected in the 14 months since the launch in July 2021 till now, we have collected 65 metric tons of shoe waste, which is from about 230,000 pairs of shoes. And by the way, 232,000 pairs of shoes is just 1% of what we just buy in a year. So it's a bucket, a drop in the bucket. So can you imagine that if everybody embraced the concept of circularity, how wonderful the world will be? But it is a journey. We started off with 0. Today we are preventing 65 metric tons of shoe per year, and I'm quite sure in the future it will be more. So for all of you who have shoes and you need to throw away in the future, please think twice. Please donate that to the recycling bin, the orange color recycling bin, so that we can recycle your shoes, as an example. So I wanted to basically emphasize the point, Peter. Everybody has a role to play, whether big or small, individual or corporates or government.
Thank you, Paul. And Mariana, from an NGO perspective, would you have some thoughts on Professor Hoffman's question?
Yes, thank you, Adrian, and thank you for your question as well, Peter. I think whether the transition will be led by small businesses or by companies, big companies, existing companies, will largely depend on the role the government chooses to play. And let me elaborate. And just also start by saying that I see Paul's point of view that everyone needs to collaborate, and I'm fully on board. But just last week, I read this 2022 study that looked at 92 companies listed in the sustainability index. I don't know well what it's called, but something along those lines. And they were trying to understand what were they doing regarding circular economy and how they were reporting about it. And what they found was a clear pattern that all these 92 companies in the EU were either reporting eco-efficiency measures at the beginning of life of their manufacturing process, meaning using less energy, less water, less materials, or waste management at the end. What does this tell us? That there's not a lot of the effectiveness, the reusing and rethinking, that's not happening yet. The momentum is not there yet. However, when you look, and this is happening in Europe, which is what I understand, the SMEs are the ones driving a lot of the innovation, are the ones redesigning. I recently met with this small business in Belgium that is a law tech firm that are coming up with technology solutions that use just enough water. So all these different ideas and business offerings are happening with the smaller companies. However, I do think that small companies have a really hard time, and they need to play with the big guys and with the existing guys because they need investment and money. However, at the end of the day, if the EU or Singapore governments, but I don't know much about Singapore, so I won't say anything, decides to regulate in a way that the big companies see no choice, they will drive the transition. They will because they will see that there's no other way. So they're going to put their money and they're going to innovate and they're going to design, and boom, big change. If they don't regulate the right way and they let them to get in the sidelines and just recycle and just decrease the resources in a way that just still linear, then I do think that the transition is going to be pushed by the new energy and the SMEs. So from an NGO perspective who lives in regulation based on what I see how the world works, we always have a few outliers. Like Paul, I think you're doing fantastic work. Unfortunately, I don't think you are the exception today, based on what I see.
But let me add to your point, because I do want to add a point, and also take the opportunity to answer a question from Zarina Medusa. The permeable cord that the example I just used, there is a technical collaboration between Dow, a large company, and BT Swap is a local SME, in the sense that we are using the water-based binder technology to essentially encourage the use of safer material that has a lower VOC. Now, you all know VOC, when you go up to the air mixed with carbon dioxide, will produce acid rain, and therefore will make the climate change even worse, right? So our goal was to reduce VOC to the atmosphere by reusing as much of water-based binder technology than the conventional solvent-based. So there is a technology discussion going on in that particular project. Now, then I want to answer Zarina's question, because she has a very interesting question. Is it efficient from economic standpoint to reuse material and return back to the customer? Will in future customer receive contribution for return product? And I kind of wanted to answer this question by using a simple example of returning our plastic bottle, right? So many years ago, I saw it in my eyes, people depositing plastic bottle in supermarket in Germany and in Scandinavian country. I love that, right? And then in return, they will receive coupons, which they can use to the supermarket to buy stuff, right? Now, there are costs, the investment that needs to be done on the infrastructure, and it depends on who pay the cost. Eventually, it will come back to the economy, whether is it borne by a taxpayer like you and I, or whether is it borne by consumer-supplier relationship, or what. But still, at the end of the day, the idea is the right thing, because we are reducing waste to end up in the environment. Like Cathrine said, waste is is like a I mean, you need enzyme to decompose the waste, right? So it's part of the metabolism. So we want to reduce those things that end up in the waste to the extent possible. We want to reuse it, but the ecosystem needs to be created. And at the end of the day, somebody had to look at it, funding, and this is the point that I think Mariana is saying, that everybody have to come together and see what is the best way to do this, and hopefully at the least economic cost to the environment, to the people.
Thank you, Paul. So one good, interesting examples are libraries. Libraries preserve things. They don't generate waste. They don't throw away books. They keep a book for 200 years. And there is a question from Denise Dillon. Are libraries a form of circular economy? If so, given that they have operated for so long, are there some takeaways to be gleaned from their operations that could be translated for business to learn? Because here we are talking about learning from one another, big companies, small companies. Any thoughts on that, Mariana?
Yes, but if I can just quickly add to Paul's answer, what Zarina's question rather, about is it economically efficient? So I think for materials such as aluminum or PET, it is because we know that you return your cans and your PET bottles and they go back and they will be fully recyclable, etc. For other materials like packaging is made of different types of plastic strands, and they get weaved in, and then you cannot recycle them. So maybe it's not. So I think it's a much more complex, and we need a lot more solutions. And for some things, yes, it's very economical. For others, today it's not feasible to reuse, not yet. And that's why we need to redesign things, and that's why it's so important to focus on designing things for recyclability. Right, designing things for reuse. And I also think that we need to price things right. We don't price externalities, right? We don't price the fact that you throw something out and what's the environmental cost of it, going out into the environment. So that's another component that if governments price things right, then suddenly I think it'll be a lot more economical to reuse things, and people will be designing things to be reused. But sorry, I'll end there. Libraries. That's a very interesting question. And I don't have a full answer because I am not an expert on libraries, and I don't know to what extent they're economically sustainable. Are they a form of circular economy? Yes, that's perfect because you are decreasing the use of resources and optimizing the value of the resources that you have. A book will get read 100 times versus 1 time if you have it in your home. So that's what we want. And we see this model replicated in what I mentioned earlier, which is called a library of things, which are placed as community, usually at the community level. So this is something that is run by cities. That they create spaces for people to rent things, usually for very cheap or many times almost for free, for a small membership. I've seen this for sporting equipment, for kitchen appliances. It's just from what I understand, and all the libraries of things models that I have seen so far are still heavily subsidized by cities. Now, the question is that a good way to use our tax money? I would say, yes, let's not subsidize the fossil fuel industry and let's subsidize library of things. So then it's fine with me. But yes, there are forms of circular economy, but the economic sustainability, I think it's still a question.
Mariana, you will be happy to note that the shoe recycling ecosystem project in Singapore and Malaysia is a joint funding by public, people, and private partnership. And it's not from any single party, and that's the beauty of it. People do come in to support when they see the value of the and buy-in of the project, right? It's not funded by just the government. It's not just funded by private company. It's not funded by individual. Everyone contributes something towards that model, in the sense. So hey, that's the best buy-in if you can get.
Thank you, Paul. I'm mindful of the time, and we can see a lot of passion in this room and a lot of questions being generated. But unfortunately, I'm a timekeeper and I have to make sure that time is of the essence. One final question for each one of you, and it's a very important question because all of us would like to leave this room with one key takeaway from attending this webinar, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists, can you give me one key takeaway for our audience to bring home in order to support actions on the circular economy? Who would like to go first?
Ladies? I can go first. One word, collaboration. Because you have just heard the panelists share with all of us that for circular economy to work, an ecosystem need to be created. And you can't get a working and sustainable ecosystem operating sustainably, pun intended, unless you get a collaboration from all the stakeholders. You get buy-in and collaboration of all stakeholders, a difficult challenge, the mountain Everest can be climbed. So I urge every one of us here to collaborate, to look at problem statements, to find ways to work together, instead of saying, this is your problem, this is your problem, this is my problem, and so on and so forth. Come together, come and share the best of mind, share the best of technology, and work towards a workable solution for what we call planet Earth. That is our livable city, planet Earth.
Thank you, Paul. Who wants to go next?
I could join in with my shared learning, and I believe it is just in the same family as Paul Fong is emphasizing on collaboration. I would say think horizontally. In business world, we call verticals, that would be like industries and asset-heavy industries as construction, textile, car, and they like their solitude and their own rules. Then we have a lot of system integrating industries, and they don't know yet how important they are for the transition. As system provider, it can be ICT systems, it can be accounting systems, and when we put like these neutral experts and industries on the task force, how do you design an accounting system for a circular balance sheet? How do you design a circular ready digital platform with the crazy circular intelligence from the ICT industry? I think that will also connect a little bit invisible not so harmful, but it will actually maybe provide a faster transitional knowledge between textile, construction, and cars and shipping, whatever. So I would say really go horizontal into this, and that's where I see a lot of new bright minds and businesses will be contributors.
Thank you. Mariana.
Well, then I would like to use this last 30 seconds or a minute as a just call to action for the audience. At the end of the day, if you put aside, technology is very exciting and innovation, it's really stimulating. But at the end of the day, circular economy, it's about well-being and about just remembering that we don't need that much stuff. We can live with less, and it's a positive thing. And sometimes it gets equated with like, oh, we need to consume less. No, don't tell me what to consume. But it's also maybe a reminder that we can live beautiful, fulfilling, satisfying lives in a simple way, and that will bring us and our families, a beautiful experience, and it will also allow us to stay on this planet for longer. So I guess also just remember, circular economy really is let's use that as a reminder that do we need that much? No, we don't. Let's spend more time outdoors. Let's spend more time, enjoying and instead of trying to have more, because we consumers, we do play our role by wanting all these things, all this more. We do move the whole machinery. So maybe just to complement the business perspective, just to call on all of us to rethink, and yeah, that will be
and I will have the last word. So this session is personally so enriching for me to learn what different companies and societies have embarked on their journey towards the circular economy. We have also learned that there are various circular actions to support the circular economy. And whether we are a country, a company, or an individual consumer, we can play a part. We have also learned and addressed the importance of value chain, industry symbiosis, thank you, Cathrine, and ecosystem that are systems that are needed to support the circular economy. And thank you so much, panelists, for the final key takeaway. And I do agree wholeheartedly with you. Collaboration is key. Yep. So thank you so much to our distinguished panelists for sharing their insights and experience. Special thanks also goes to Dr. Denise Dillon, Nicole De La Cruz, and Erica Neo for organizing these Emerging Leaders series. Thank you all participants, audience, for your time and participation. There is a satisfaction survey, which I hope you can fill up before you leave the room. Thank you so much. And we will see you at our next Emerging Leaders series. Thank you.